Captain Jake Morrison looked out from the bridge of the UES Liberty at the massive alien ships floating in space around Earth. The ships were huge. Bigger than anything humans had ever built. They blocked out the stars with their dark holes. For 3 days now, the Galaxy Council fleet had been waiting there, like hungry wolves outside a farmhouse. Jake had been a ship captain for 15 years. He had seen a lot of things in space, but nothing like this. The alien ships were beautiful in a cold way. Their smooth surfaces reflected the light from Earth's sun. But Jake knew what they really were. They were weapons pointed at his home. On the main screen, the face of Ambassador Vexstar appeared. The alien looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. His skin was green and scaly, and his eyes were yellow like a cat's. When he spoke, his voice came through the translator as a cold, mechanical sound. Captain Morrison, Vexstar said, "Your planet has 48 hours to comply with the new Council directive. Half of your population must report to the designated collection points for immediate transport to Council territories." Jake felt his hands tighten on the arms of his captain's chair. He had heard the directive already. The Council was calling it voluntary service for the greater galactic good. Everyone knew what it really was. Slavery. They wanted to take 4 billion humans and use them as workers across their empire. "Ambassador," Jake said, keeping his voice steady, "we've told you our answer. We need more time to discuss this with our government." The alien's head tilted to one side. It was a gesture that looked almost human, but Jake could see the coldness in those yellow eyes. "Captain, your species has had 30 years to prove your worth to the Galaxy Council. You have been given food, protection, and guidance. It's time to repay that debt." Jake wanted to laugh, but he didn't. The Council had given humans basic food supplies and kept other alien species from attacking Earth. In return, humans had mined asteroids, built space stations, and fought in the Council's wars. Young men and women from Earth had died fighting. Aliens they had never heard of, for reasons they didn't understand. The protection had come with a price. Humans couldn't build certain types of weapons. They couldn't explore beyond the systems the Council allowed. They couldn't make treaties with other species. Earth was a planet-sized prison, and the Council held the keys. "We understand the debt," Jake said carefully. "But taking half our population, that's not payment, that's extinction." Vexstar's expression didn't change. "Your species will survive. The selected humans will be well cared for. They will have purpose. They will serve the greater good of the galaxy." Jake knew about the Council's other servant species. He had seen them on Council stations and worlds. Kethver had once been a proud warrior race. They cleaned floors and carried bags for Council officials. The Zulatari had been master engineers. They repaired Council machines and lived. In barracks like animals, the communication ended, and Jake stared at the blank screen. He thought about his daughter Amy, who was studying to be a doctor. He thought about his wife Lisa, who taught school children about the stars. Under the new directive, both of them would be taken away. He might never see them again. Down on Earth, President Kevin Turner was having the same thoughts. He sat in his office in the Capitol building, looking at reports from around the world. Every major city had Council ships hovering over it. The message was clear: obey, or face the consequences. Turner had been president for 6 years. He had tried to work with the Council, tried to find compromises that would help both humans and aliens. But the Council never compromised. They made demands, and humans obeyed. That was how the system worked. The door to his office opened, and Admiral Lisa Hayes walked in. She was the commander of Earth's defense forces, what little they had. The Council allowed humans to have small patrol ships and basic weapons. Nothing that could threaten a real military force. "Mr. President," Lisa said, "I've been talking to our fleet commanders. They're asking for orders." Turner looked up at her. Lisa was a small woman, but she had the eyes of a fighter. She had been in the military for 20 years, and she had never liked taking orders from aliens who looked down on humans like insects. "What kind of orders are they expecting?" Turner asked. "The kind that might get us all killed," Lisa replied. "But also the kind that might save us," Turner understood. For 30 years, humans had been building ships and training soldiers. Council thought they were watching everything humans did, but they weren't as smart as they believed. Human engineers were good at hiding things. Human soldiers were good at keeping secrets. Turner walked to the window and looked up at the sky. He could see the council ships even in daylight, dark spots against the blue. They were so confident, so sure, that humans would give in. They had never met a species that said no to them. Admiral Turner said quietly, "Send a message to all our ships. Tell them to get ready." "Ready for what, sir?" Turner turned back to her. "Ready to remind the galaxy why humans are the only species on Earth that made it to the stars." 3 hours later, Turner stood before the Council Assembly on Luna Station. The station was a massive structure that orbited Earth's moon. Representatives from 47 alien species sat in the Great Hall, all of them waiting to hear Earth's answer. Vextar stood at the center of the room, his yellow eyes fixed on Turner. Around him, other council members whispered to each other, in languages that sounded like wind through metal or water over stones. "President Turner," Vextar said, his voice echoing through the hall, "the deadline approaches. What is humanity's decision?" Turner looked around the room at all the alien faces. Some looked curious, others bored, a few seemed almost sympathetic. But most looked at him the way humans might look at a dog that was taking too long to learn. A trick. For 30 years, humans had bent their knee to these creatures. They had accepted insults, restrictions, and demands. They had sent their children to die in alien wars. They had given up their freedom piece by piece, always hoping that cooperation would lead to acceptance. But humans were never going to be accepted. They were always going to be the servants, the workers, the expendable soldiers. The council would take and take until there was nothing left to take. Turner stepped forward. The hall fell silent. "We refuse," he said. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the hall erupted in chaos. Alien voices rose in anger and disbelief. Some council members stood up, their faces twisted with rage. Others looked shocked as if they couldn't believe what they had heard. Vextar's yellow eyes grew wide. "You... ... refuse? You understand what this means?" "I understand perfectly," Turner said, his voice cutting through the noise. "It means we're done taking orders from you. It means we're done being your slaves. It means the next time you want something from humanity, you're going to have to ask nicely." The council chamber fell silent again. In that silence, Turner could hear the sound of his own heartbeat. He had just declared war on the most powerful force in the galaxy. His species was outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1. Their technology was primitive, compared to the Council's weapons. But humans had something the Council had forgotten about. They had learned it from millions of years of evolution on a world where everything wanted to kill them. They had remembered it through wars and disasters and struggles that would have broken other species. They had the will to fight. Even when fighting meant dying, especially when fighting meant dying. Turner turned and walked out of the hall, leaving the council to face a terrible new reality. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone had told them no, and that someone was human. The first shots were fired 6 minutes after President Turner left the council chamber. Alien ships around Earth powered up their weapons, expecting humans to panic and surrender. They had done this before with other species, show overwhelming force, and the primitives would beg for mercy. They were about to learn that humans were different. Commander Amy Parker sat in the pilot seat of her ship, hidden deep inside the asteroid belt. The ship looked like an old mining vessel covered in scars and patches. Council inspectors had looked at it dozens of times over the years. They saw exactly what Amy wanted them to see, a beat-up old cargo hauler used for collecting space rocks. What they didn't see were the missile tubes built into the mining equipment. They didn't notice that the power core was 3 times larger than it should be. They missed the armor plating disguised as hull patches. Council was smart, but they thought they knew everything about human technology. That was their first mistake, all mining crews. "This is Control," Amy heard through her headset. It was Admiral Hayes, speaking from Earth. "Time to bring in the harvest?" Amy smiled. For 15 years, she had waited for those words. Around her, 30 other mining ships came to life. Their crews had been preparing for this moment since the day they first saw Council ships in Earth's sky. The UES Defiance was Amy's ship, though the Council knew it by another name. According to their records, it was the civilian vessel Happy Miner, registered for asteroid collection in the outer system. Amy had filed mining reports every month for 12 years. She had even delivered real ore to keep up the pretense. But the Happy Miner was dead now. In its place was a warship that human engineers had dreamed of building since the first alien boot touched Earth's soil. Defiance to all ships, Amy broadcast. Light 'em up! Mining fleet erupted from there. Hiding places like angry hornets had been scattered across the asteroid belt, looking like harmless rock collectors. Now they revealed themselves as humanity's secret weapon, a fleet of warships. Disguised as civilian vessels, the Council ships around Earth detected the new contacts immediately. Their commanders weren't worried. 30 human ships against 300 Council vessels. The humans were brave but stupid. It would be over in minutes. The first Council ship to die was the CNS Eternal Virtue, a heavy cruiser that had been threatening the orbital stations around Earth. Amy watched it on her targeting screen as her missiles struck its hull. The alien ship's shields flickered and died. Then the hull began to come apart. Council shields were designed to stop energy weapons, civilized tools of galactic warfare. They were not designed to stop chunks of metal moving at 20,000 miles per hour. Human kinetic weapons were crude and primitive by galactic standards. They were also devastatingly effective. Dr. Ryan Scott had spent 15 years studying Council technology. Officially, he worked as a cultural exchange scientist, helping aliens understand human customs. Unofficially, he had been taking apart every piece of Council equipment he could get his hands on. Ryan had learned something important about the aliens who ruled the galaxy. They were very good at building things, but they were not good at fighting. Their weapons were designed to disable enemy ships, not destroy them. Their tactics were based on honor and fairness. Their shields were built to defend against weapons that followed the rules of civilized warfare. Humans had never been civilized. Second wave of Council ships moved to intercept the human fleet. Their commander, a proud Zephyrian named Corvash, had fought in dozens of battles across the galaxy, had never lost a fight. He opened communications with the lead human ship, expecting to accept their surrender. Human vessels, Corvash. Transmitted, you are vastly outnumbered. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Amy's voice came back through space, clear and cold. Zephyrian vessels, you are about to learn why humans are the only species on Earth that survived. Corvash was confused by the response. What did survival on one planet have to do with space combat? He was about to find out. The human ships attacked. Like nothing he had ever seen, they didn't form neat battle lines or follow accepted tactical doctrine. They scattered in all directions, using the asteroids as cover. They fired from impossible angles, used debris as weapons, and seemed to ignore the basic rules of space warfare. One human ship rammed his flagship, sacrificing itself to take out the bridge. The pilot could have ejected, could have lived to fight another day. Instead, he chose to die, taking enemies with him. Corvash had never encountered a species that treated suicide attacks as acceptable tactics. Captain Dan Murphy commanded the UES Vengeance from the outer edge of the battle. His ship was smaller than the others, built for speed rather than firepower. His job was to watch the bigger picture and coordinate the attack. Dan had studied every piece of information humans had gathered about Council military doctrine. The aliens fought like chess masters, thinking several moves ahead and following established patterns. They expected their enemies to do the same, but humans didn't fight like chess masters. They fought like angry children with explosives, unpredictable, vicious, and willing to break things that couldn't be fixed. All ships, Pattern 7, Dan ordered. It was a maneuver that human strategists had developed in secret. Based on tactics that had won battles on Earth centuries ago, the Council had never seen anything like it because no civilized species would ever try something so insane. The human fleet suddenly converged on the center of the Council formation. Instead of trying to fight their way through, they triggered a series of explosions that turned the battlefield into a cloud of debris and radiation. When the cloud cleared, half the Council ships were dead or dying. The surviving aliens tried to retreat. But the humans weren't finished. Amy's ship and 5 others broke off to pursue the fleeing vessels. The Council commanders expected the humans to let them go. That was how civilized warfare worked. You didn't slaughter retreating enemies. The Council had forgotten that humans weren't civilized. Lieutenant Ben Cole was Amy's weapons officer. He had grown up listening to stories about the old wars on Earth, when humans fought each other with everything they had. His grandfather had told him about battles where soldiers fought until the last man, where surrender was worse than death. Commander Ben reported, "We have firing solutions on all retreating vessels." Amy thought about the Council's demand. Half of Earth's population taken away to be slaves? Her own children were down there, along with everyone else she had ever cared about. "Fire," she ordered. The battle lasted for hours. When it was over, the space around Earth was filled with debris from Council ships. A few alien vessels had escaped. But most of the mighty Council fleet was scrap metal floating in the void. On Earth, people looked up at the sky and saw something they had never seen before. The alien ships were gone. For the first time in 30 years, Earth's sky belonged to humans. President Turner received the battle report in his secure bunker. Admiral Hayes stood beside him, her face grim but satisfied. "Casualties?" Turner asked. "We lost 8 ships," Hayes replied. 96 crew? Members killed in action. Turner nodded. It was a heavy price, but not as heavy as it could have been. The Council had lost over 200 ships and thousands of crew members. More importantly, they had lost something else. Their reputation for invincibility. "What now?" Turner asked. Hayes looked at the tactical display showing the positions of human ships throughout the solar system. For decades, the Council had thought they were watching a primitive species that could barely manage spaceflight. They had been watching something else entirely, a species that had been preparing for war from the moment they first looked up at the stars. "Now," Hayes said, "we show them what happens when you threaten human children." The first battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been holding back for 30 years. The Council had wanted to see what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. They were about to find out. News of the battle at Earth spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 different worlds, aliens who had served the Council for centuries watched the reports with growing amazement. The impossible had happened. Someone had defeated a Council fleet. The humans had done more than win a battle. They had broken the spell of Council invincibility that had kept the galaxy in line for 3,000 years. Colonel Sam Bennett knew nothing about galactic politics. He only cared about the human workers trapped on Kepler 44b, a mining world 3 systems away from Earth. Sam had been planning their rescue for 2 years, ever since his younger brother Mark had been sent there as a volunteer worker. The transport ship U's rescue carried 200 of Earth's best soldiers toward the mining planet. They were packed into a cargo vessel that looked harmless to Council scanners. The aliens expected humans to be confused and scared after losing their first battle. They didn't expect Earth to go on the attack. Kepler-44b was a dead rock circling a red star. The only valuable thing about it was the rare metals buried in its crust. 50,000 human workers lived there in underground tunnels, mining ore for Council factories. They worked 16 hours a day and slept in rooms barely big enough for a bed. The planet was guarded by Zephyrian soldiers who treated human workers like trained animals. They carried shock weapons that could drop a man to his knees with pain. Any human who complained was punished. Any human who fought back disappeared. Sam's ship landed at the main spaceport just like any other supply vessel. The Zephyrian guards barely looked at it. Humans delivered food and equipment to the mining operation every few weeks. It was routine. But this delivery was different. Captain Megan Torres was the first one out of the cargo hold. She looked like any other human worker, tired, dirty, and beaten down by years of alien rule. The Zephyrian guard at the loading dock didn't even glance at her twice. That was his last mistake. Megan moved faster than the alien could react. Her knife found the gap in his armor before he could reach for his shock weapon. The guard fell without making a sound all around the spaceport. Other workers were dealing with other guards. The Zephyrians had grown lazy after years of controlling humans who never fought back. They didn't understand that some humans had been soldiers before they became miners. Within 10 minutes, Sam's team controlled the spaceport. The real rescue operation could begin. The underground mines were a maze of tunnels carved into solid rock. Human workers moved through them like ghosts, their faces marked by years of hard labor and poor food. Most of them had given up hope of ever seeing Earth again. Sam found his brother Mark in Tunnel 7, operating a drilling machine that was older than both of them. Mark had lost 40 pounds since leaving Earth. His hands were scarred from working with sharp metal. His eyes had the empty look of someone who had stopped believing in tomorrow. "Mark," Sam called softly. His brother turned around slowly. For a moment, Mark's face showed nothing, and his eyes went wide. "Sam, what are you doing here?" "Taking you home," Sam replied. Word spread through the mines faster than Sam had thought possible. Earth soldiers were here. The rescue had begun. Workers dropped their tools and started moving toward the main elevators. Some of them had been trapped on this world for 10 years. They had almost forgotten what freedom felt like. But the Zephyrian overseers weren't going to let their valuable workers simply walk away. Commander Zekvar led the counterattack with 50 heavily armed guards. The Zephyrians were tall, powerful, aliens with thick armor and energy weapons. They had put down worker uprisings before. Humans were weak creatures who could be controlled with fear and pain. Zekvar had never fought human soldiers. The battle in the mines was nothing like the space combat around Earth. This was close quarters fighting in narrow tunnels. With no room for fancy tactics or advanced technology, it was the kind of fighting that humans had been doing for millions of years. Sergeant Tony Walsh had been a coal miner before he joined the military. He knew how to fight in tight spaces. When the Zephyrian guards came charging down Tunnel 12, Tony was waiting for them with explosives taken from the mining equipment. The tunnel collapsed. Trapping half the alien force on the wrong side of tons of rock, the survivors found themselves facing humans who knew every inch of the underground complex. Private Lisa Johnson used mining cables to create tripwires across the main passages. The heavily armored Zephyrians couldn't see the thin cables in the darkness. They fell hard, and human soldiers were waiting for them when they hit the ground. Corporal Mike Davis had spent 3 years working in these tunnels before joining Earth's military. He knew which support beams were load-bearing and which ones could be removed safely. When the Zephyrian guards tried to use the main elevator shaft as a fighting position, Mike brought the whole thing down on their heads. The Zephyrians had superior weapons and armor, but they were fighting on human terms. Now, in the cramped, dark tunnels, their energy weapons were less effective than human knives and improvised clubs. Their armor made them slow and clumsy. Their tactics were designed for open battlefield combat, not underground warfare. Within 2 hours, the mines belonged to the humans, but Sam wasn't satisfied with just rescuing the workers. The Zephyrians had been cruel masters for too long. They had beaten human workers for small mistakes. They had denied medical care to sick humans. They had treated Earth's children like property, Colonel Megan reported. "We've secured all the mining levels. What are your orders?" Sam looked at his brother Mark, who was helping other rescued workers prepare for evacuation. Mark's hands shook when he picked up tools. He flinched when anyone spoke loudly. The Zephyrians had broken something inside him that might never heal. "Burn it," Sam ordered. The mining operation on Kepler 440b had been running for 50 years. It could produce rare metals worth billions of council credits. The machinery was worth even more. Destroying it would cost the council a fortune and leave them without a major source of strategic materials. But Sam wasn't thinking about economics. He was thinking about justice. The humans rigged the mining equipment with explosives. They set fires in the storage areas. They sabotaged the power plants and communication systems. When they were finished, there would be nothing left for the council to salvage. Engineer Chris Johnson had been working on council infrastructure for 15 years. He knew how alien systems worked, and more importantly, he knew how to break them. Chris didn't just destroy the mining equipment. He made sure it would explode in ways that would damage other systems. The fusion reactor that powered the mining operation was designed. With multiple safety systems, Chris carefully disabled each one, turning the reactor into a bomb that would destroy everything within 10 miles. "How long do we have?" Sam asked. 30 minutes, Chris replied. Maybe less. The evacuation was chaotic but efficient.
50,000.
Human workers crowded into every available transport ship. Many of them had never expected to leave this world alive. Some were crying. Others were too shocked to speak. The transport ships lifted off from Kepler 44 to B, just as the fusion reactor began its final meltdown. From space, the humans watched as their former prison disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire. The destruction could be seen from 3 systems away. Council ships throughout the sector received the same message, where humans had been slaves.
Ow.
There was now only empty space and radioactive dust. Back on Earth, President Turner received the report from Colonel Bennett. The rescue mission had been a complete success. Every human worker had been evacuated safely. The mining operation was gone, but more importantly, the galaxy had received another message about humanity's new attitude. The species that had once accepted slavery would now fight to free their people. The species that had once bent their knee to alien masters would now destroy anything that threatened their children. Admiral Hayes studied the intelligence reports coming in from across Council space. Other species were watching the human rebellion. With great interest, some were scared, others were hopeful. A few were making plans of their own. "The Council will retaliate," Hayes warned Turner. "Let them come," Turner replied. "They wanted to see what humans are capable of. We're just getting started." The war between humanity and the Galaxy Council was spreading. What had begun as a single act of defiance was becoming something much larger. For the first time in galactic history, the Council faced an enemy that fought not for territory or resources, but for something they had forgotten how to understand: freedom and humans would burn down the galaxy before they gave it up again. The Galaxy Council had ruled space for 3,000 years. In all that time, no species had ever dared to openly challenge their authority. The human rebellion was not just an attack on Council territory, it was an attack on the natural order. Of the galaxy itself, Supreme Chancellor Vorthak called an emergency session of the full Council. Representatives from every member species gathered in the great hall on the capital world of Nexus Prime. The mood was dark and angry. These aliens had built their entire civilization on the idea that they were superior to primitive species like humanity. Now, the primitives were winning. "The human infestation must be stopped," Vorthak declared to the assembled delegates. His voice echoed through the massive chamber like thunder. "We will show the galaxy what happens to species that forget their place." The Hegemony Armada was the Council's answer to the human problem. It was the largest military force ever assembled. In galactic history, over 3,000 ships drawn from 47 different species. The fleet included everything from fast attack craft to massive dreadnoughts that could destroy entire moons. Fleet Admiral Kekstara commanded the Armada from the bridge of the CNS Domination. A ship so large it had its own artificial gravity and weather systems. Kekstara had fought in dozens of campaigns across the galaxy. He had crushed rebellions, conquered worlds, and brought the Council's peace to hundreds of species. But he had never fought humans. The Armada moved toward Earth like a slow-moving storm. Council propaganda broadcasts announced that the human rebellion would be crushed within days. Order would be restored. The galaxy would remember why the Council ruled and primitives obeyed on Earth. President Turner watched the approaching fleet through telescopes and sensors scattered across the solar system. The alien armada was so large it blocked out stars. As it moved through space, every human who saw it understood that this was the end. No species could stand against such overwhelming force, but humans had learned something during their short time in space. Sometimes the biggest targets were the easiest to hit. Dr. Rachel Kim had been working in secret for 5 years. on a project the Council would never have approved. Deep in the asteroid belt, hidden among chunks of worthless rock she had built, something that the aliens would have considered impossible. The Prometheus array looked like a collection of old satellite dishes and communication equipment. Council inspectors had examined it several times and classified it as a deep space research station. They saw exactly what Rachel wanted them to see: primitive human technology trying to study distant stars. What they didn't see was a network of gravitational lenses capable of focusing the energy of Earth's sun into a weapon that could burn through any known shield or armor. Rachel had studied out Council technology for decades. She knew that alien ships were powered by fusion reactors and protected by energy shields. Both systems had one critical weakness: it could be overloaded by too much power applied too quickly. The Prometheus array could deliver the power of a star. Captain Dan Murphy commanded the defense of the Sol system when the hegemony armada arrived. His small fleet of 200 ships looked pitiful compared to the alien force. The Council commanders expected him to surrender immediately. Instead, Dan sent a message that was broadcast across all frequencies. Unknown vessels, you are entering human space without permission. Turn around now or face the consequences. Fleet Admiral Kexthera couldn't believe what he was hearing. A primitive species with barely 200 ships was threatening a force 15 times larger. It was either incredible courage or incredible stupidity. Human Commander Kexthera replied, "You are outnumbered 15-1. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Dan's response was immediate: "Come and take it." The battle began exactly as the Council expected. The human fleet scattered in all directions, running from the overwhelming alien force, ordered his ships to pursue and destroy them one by one. It would be a simple hunt, like chasing rabbits through a field. But the humans weren't running in panic. They were leading the armada exactly where they wanted it to go. Major Kate Sullivan had been hiding in the asteroid belt for 6 months, with a force of 500 Marines. Her job was to turn every piece of space rock in the outer system into a weapon. The Council ships chasing the human fleet found themselves flying through a maze of hidden explosives and improvised missiles. Asteroids that had drifted harmlessly in space for millions of years suddenly erupted with nuclear fire. Council ships found their hulls torn open by chunks of metal moving faster than bullets. The neat formation of the armada began to break apart as ships tried to avoid the deadly debris. Lieutenant Colonel Nick Edwards watched the battle from his command post on one of Jupiter's moons. His finger hovered over the control that would activate the Prometheus array. The alien fleet was almost in position. A few more minutes and he would have clear shots at the largest ships. "Colonel," his communications officer reported, "the enemy fleet is entering the targeting zone." Nick looked at the tactical display. 3,000 alien ships were spread across millions of miles of space, all of them focused on hunting down the fleeing human vessels. They had no idea what was about to happen. "Fire," Nick ordered. The Prometheus array came to life with the power of creation itself. Gravitational lenses across the solar system focused the light of the sun into beams of pure energy. The beams were invisible until they struck their targets, but their effects were impossible to miss. The center of the hegemony armada simply vanished. One moment there were hundreds of Council ships advancing in perfect formation. The next moment there was nothing but expanding clouds of superheated gas. The surviving alien commanders tried to understand what had happened. Their sensors showed massive energy discharges coming from empty space. Ships were being destroyed by weapons they couldn't see or detect. It was like fighting ghosts. Kexthera stared at his tactical display in horror. Half his fleet was gone. The humans had somehow turned their own star into a weapon. It was impossible. No species had that kind of technology. But the evidence was floating around him in the form of debris that had once been Council warships. "All ships," Kexthera broadcast, "retreat to minimum safe distance, regroup and assess the situation." But the humans weren't finished with them yet. Captain Amy Parker led the counterattack from the inner system. The human fleet that had been running in apparent panic suddenly turned around and began moving toward the confused alien survivors. They moved like hunters who had just finished setting a trap. The remaining Council ships tried to form defensive positions. but they were scattered and demoralized. Many of their commanders had never seen their own ships destroyed so quickly. The humans attacked with the same brutal efficiency they had shown in every battle so far. The battle lasted 12 hours, and it was over fewer than 300. Council ships remained from the original force of 3,000. The survivors retreated in disorder, broadcasting warnings about human superweapons and impossible. Technology Kixera's flagship was among the ships that escaped. He sat in his command chair, staring at the reports of the disaster. The greatest military force in galactic history had been defeated by a species that barely knew how to build spaceships 30 years ago.
Merle.
His second-in-command asked, quietly, "What are your orders?" Kexthara looked at the tactical display showing the positions of the surviving ships. The council had sent him to crush a primitive rebellion. Instead, he had learned that the primitives were not primitive at all. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors. "Send a message to the council," Kexthara said finally. "Tell them the humans are not what we thought they were. Tell them we need to negotiate." "Sir," the officer protested, "the council does not negotiate with rebels." Kexthara gestured toward the debris field that had once been the pride of the galactic fleet. "The council has never fought anything like this before. The humans don't follow the rules. They don't fight fair. They turn everything into a weapon." Back on Earth, President Turner received the battle reports with grim satisfaction. The hegemony armada was broken. The council's reputation for invincibility was destroyed, but the war was far from over.
What now?
Admiral Hayes asked. Turner looked up at the stars, where the wreckage of alien ships still glowed with residual heat from the Prometheus array. The galaxy had wanted to see what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. Now they knew, Turner said. "We show them what happens when you threaten our children. We show them that humans don't just survive, we thrive." 6 months after the destruction of the hegemony armada, the galaxy looked very different. The mighty Galaxy Council still existed, but their control was slipping away like sand through their fingers. Species that had obeyed them for thousands of years were asking dangerous questions. If humans could defeat the Council's greatest fleet, what else was possible? Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the UES Freedom. The ship was built from captured Council technology and human engineering. It was faster than anything the aliens had, and armed with weapons that could punch through any known shield. Jake commanded a fleet of 60 similar vessels, all crewed by humans and aliens who had chosen to fight for their independence. The war had changed everything. What started as humanity's refusal to become slaves had grown into something much larger. The Galactic Liberation Front now included 23 different species, all united by a simple idea that freedom was worth fighting for. Ambassador Ellen Wright walked through the corridors of Luna Station, heading toward the most important meeting in galactic history. 6 months ago, she had been a minor diplomat trying to negotiate better working conditions for human miners. Now, she represented a coalition of free worlds that controlled nearly half the galaxy. The Galaxy Council had finally agreed to peace talks. It was the first time in their 3,000-year history that they had asked for negotiations instead of demanding surrender. Ellen entered the Great Hall, where Council representatives waited nervously. The same chamber where President Turner had refused their demands now hosted aliens who looked afraid. They had good reason to be afraid. The humans and their allies controlled the trade routes, the mining operations, and most importantly, the military technology that kept the galaxy running. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak looked older than Ellen remembered. The stress of losing half his empire had aged the alien leader badly. His one-sprout posture was bent, and his eyes held a hollow look of someone who had seen his life's work crumble. "Ambassador Wright," Vorthak said carefully, "the Council is prepared to discuss terms for ending this conflict." Ellen sat down across from him. She had learned a lot about negotiating in the past 6 months. The most important lesson was that humans no longer needed to ask for anything. They could take what they wanted. "The terms are simple," Ellen replied. The Council recognizes the independence of all Liberation Front worlds. You stop demanding tribute from any species. You disband your military forces and limit yourselves to local defense fleets. Vorthak's yellow eyes went wide. Those terms would destroy the Council. We cannot agree to such demands. Then the war continues, Ellen said calmly. And you know how that will end. President Kevin Linton Turner was establishing the new order from his office on Earth. Every day brought reports of more species joining the Liberation Front, the HFY. Warriors had remembered their proud history and thrown off their slave collars. The Zultari engineers were building weapons for the rebellion. Even some Council species were switching sides. Turner looked at the star charts covering his wall. Red markers showed Liberation Front territory. Blue markers showed areas still under Council control. 6 months ago, the entire map had been blue. Now, more than half was red. The color was spreading every day. General Paul Watson commanded the Liberation Fleet from his base on Titan. The former human colony was now the military headquarters for the largest rebel force in galactic history. Paul had fought in Earth's last war before the aliens arrived. He understood how to organize an army and how to win campaigns. But this wasn't just about military victory. Paul was building something that had never existed before, a galactic government based on cooperation instead of domination. Every species in the Liberation Front had a voice in military decisions. Every world had the right to defend itself. The Council's greatest mistake had been treating other species like property. The Liberation Front's greatest strength was treating them like partners. Dr. Ryan Scott continued his work reverse engineering Council technology. But now he had help from alien scientists who brought their own knowledge to the project. The Zultari understood energy systems better than humans ever could. The HFY knew metallurgy that could make stronger armor. Working together, they were creating weapons and ships that surpassed anything the Council had ever built. The EU's Defiance, Captain Amy Parker's old mining ship, had become the template for a new kind of warship. Fast, heavily armed, and crewed by mixed-species teams. These vessels were everything the Council feared, proof that cooperation was stronger than domination. Colonel Sam Bennett was training the new Liberation Army on a dozen different worlds. Human soldiers taught alien recruits how to fight in close quarters. Alien warriors showed humans techniques they had never imagined. The army that emerged from this training was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They fought not because they were ordered to, but because they believed in what they were fighting for. The final battle of the war came at Nexus Prime, the Council's capital world. The planet was defended by the last loyal Council fleets and protected by shields that had never been breached. It should have been impossible to capture, but humans specialized in doing impossible things, Captain. Dan Murphy led the assault fleet through hyperspace, using navigation data provided by Zultari rebels inside the Council's own government. The Liberation Fleet emerged from hyperspace already inside the planet's defensive perimeter, bypassing the outer shield grid entirely. The battle for Nexus Prime lasted 3 days. Council forces fought desperately to protect their homeworld, but they were facing an enemy that had learned from every previous defeat. Liberation Fleet ships worked together with perfect coordination, using tactics that combined human aggression with alien precision. When the capital fell, Galaxy Council surrendered unconditionally. President Turner addressed the new Galactic Assembly from Luna Station. Representatives from over 100 species filled the Great Hall, all of them free to speak their minds for the first time in millennia. 6 months ago, Turner said, the Galaxy Council made a simple demand. They wanted half of humanity to serve as slaves. We refused. That refusal changed everything. Turner looked out at the assembled delegates, aliens who had been enemies, slaves and masters, now sitting together as equals. The Council thought they could break us because we were small and primitive. They were wrong about both things. We're never small. We were focused. We were never primitive. We were learning. And most importantly, we were never alone. Every species in this galaxy has the right to be free. The new galactic government was unlike anything that had existed before. Instead of one dominant species ruling over others, power was shared among all members. Instead of tribute flowing upward to masters, resources were traded fairly between equals. Instead of war being used to solve disputes, conflicts were settled. Through negotiation and compromise, the Galaxy Council still existed, but only as one voice among many. They controlled their homeworlds and nothing more. The empire that had ruled space for 3,000 years was reduced to a small cluster of systems, guarded by the Liberation Fleet to ensure they never again threatened galactic peace. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood on the observation deck of the UES Humanity, watching Earth turn slowly below. The planet looked the same as it always had, but everything else was different. Human ships now patrolled trade routes across the galaxy. Human colonies were being established on worlds that had never seen alien visitors. Human children were growing up knowing they would be free to explore the stars. Was it worth it? Asked Captain Morrison, joining her at the viewing port. Hayes thought about the price of freedom. Nearly 10,000 humans had died in the war. Entire fleets had been destroyed. Some battles had been won only because humans were willing to die fighting rather than live in chains. But she also thought about what they had gained. Not just freedom for humanity, but freedom for every species in the galaxy. The right to choose their own destiny. The right to say no to demands they couldn't accept. Ask me in 100 years, Hayes replied. When our grandchildren are flying between the stars as free people, not as anyone's property. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Building a free galaxy would take generations. There would be setbacks, conflicts, and challenges that no one could predict, but humans had learned something important during their time as council subjects. Freedom wasn't something that could be given or taken away by others. It was something that had to be fought for, defended, and earned again and again. The Galaxy Council had pushed too far, and humanity had refused to break.
Ow.
The stars belonged to everyone who was brave enough to reach for them, and humans would make sure it stayed that way.